I've been a Redditor for 4 months, ever since my now ex-boyfriend introduced me to Reddit. I quickly came to love the website. There was always something interesting to read, so many subreddits to explore, and r/nosleep quickly became my favorite. I've always been fascinated by the paranormal, and I will admit without embarrassment that I believe in the existence of ghosts, monsters, and magic. Plus, ever since my ex left, the creepy tones of the stories mirrored the dark thoughts and emotions that often haunted me. Although reading r/nosleep stories always gave me a thrill, I never believed any of the stories. I always believed that, although presented as real, they were fiction. But that changed after I read a story titled, "I Wish She'd Just Been Cheating on Me." Due to my relationship issues, I felt a deep connection with the author as he shared his story. The story had a strange sense of familiarity. I waited anxiously for each update, not because I wanted to be entertained, but because, before I realized it, I felt genuine concern for the author. I was worried for him. It kept me up at night. Silly, I know, but I was terrified for him. But after reading the 3rd update and catching the hidden message, my fear escalated into a full-blown panic attack. I forced myself to calm down, and I waited for an update. I was relieved to eventually see the author commenting on other works, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. His comments seemed different. He wasn't the type of author who frequently made grammatical errors, yet many of his recent comments were littered with them. Plus, he hadn't posted a story in 3 days, which is unusual for him. He posts frequently. But I managed to convince myself that I was overreacting to the entire situation, until I saw a certain comment. In this comment, a few letters had been bolded, seemingly random. But to my horror, after I strung the letters together, I was left with a hidden message that read, "Help me." That was enough for me to take action. The only problem was that I had no idea how to help him, or even where he was. What was I supposed to do? Call the police and tell them that a story gave me a feeling that a man, who I don't know, was in danger? Of course not. Despite this, I still had a dreadful premonition about him. He needed help, I knew it. So, what did I decide to do? I found my knife, I got in my car, and I drove. I didn't know where I was driving, but I drove. And the longer I drove, the more concerned I became. Where was he? Was he okay? What was she doing to him? Is he even still alive? These thoughts and fears flooded my mind for hours. I finally stopped in front of an abandoned warehouse. Grabbing my knife, I got out of my car and got some fresh air and to stretch my legs, and was surprised to find that night had fallen. I was quite annoyed with myself for being so irresponsible and driving aimlessly for so long. But before I had a chance to dwell on my own stupidity, it happened. I don't know how, I'll never know how, but I entered the warehouse and it was him. Tethered naked and unconscious to a pole that stood in the center of a spiral of what appeared to be blood was the author. Then it hit me. The ritual he spoke of, this is where it took place. It was the same warehouse. Somehow, some way, I found him. Against all odds, I found him. I can't explain it, but my concern, my anxiety, my love had led me to him. The fear that brought us together lessened when I realized he was breathing. But my heart caught in my throat when I saw the blood streaming down the numerous cuts on his body. I ran to him in an attempt to help, but was frozen in place when I saw pictures pinned on every inch of his bare torso. Pictures of me. Slowly, curiosity and concern overcame my fear, and I approached him, relaxing my grip on the knife I had instinctively drawn. When I closed in, he stirred, groaning softly from the pain caused by the movement. He lifted his head and looked directly into my eyes. They were glazed over, as though he was drugged, but I could swear I saw a spark of recognition in their murky brown depths. But suddenly, the murkiness cleared and was replaced by a look of panic as he became more coherent. He tried to speak but could form no sound, weakened as he was. I tried to talk to him, but was interrupted by the hiss of a whisper tickling my ear. "Beautiful, isn't he?" Suddenly, I was violently shoved into the man I wanted desperately to save, and we both screamed in pain. The force of the impact embedded the pins deeper into his body, bringing forth fresh blood. It dripped from his torso and landed on my knife, which had sliced into my abdomen. I cried again as I pulled the knife out and turned to face our attacker. A woman stood in front of us. She must have been the girlfriend from the story. I hadn't pictured her looking so crazy, hair frizzed, sweat dripping off of her body. Yet at the same time, she looked calm and determined. Her brow was furrowed in concentration and her jaw jutted forward as she lunged at us. Overcome with a protective instinct, I flew towards her and successfully knocked her away from him, sending us both to the ground, my knife slipping from my hand. We landed with a thud on the concrete, my wounds screaming with intense pain. Ignoring the agony, I managed to subdue her by pinning her legs beneath my knees and holding her wrists against the cold, hard floor. We lay there, her pinned under my body. I could smell iron as blood dripped from my wound onto her stomach. She fought to break my grip, but I refused to give her the opportunity to hurt the man who stirred so much emotion in me. Powerful and strange emotions. He really was beautiful. As if reading my mind, the crazed woman under me dryly chuckled and triumphantly proclaimed, "He will always be mine." With a renewed strength, she pushed me off of her. I grabbed my knife and hurried to my feet. She pulled herself up and, with a cry, turned to attack once more. But I was ready for her. As soon as her eyes met mine, I thrust the blood-soaked knife into her chest, piercing her heart. With a final scream, she collapsed. Without injury, an unbearable pain swelled in my chest. I blacked out before she hit the ground. By the time I came to, sunlight filled the warehouse. I found myself on top of the woman, who was most definitely dead. I retrieved my knife, wiping the blood on her blouse. I stood and was surprised to find just how weak the night had left me. Summoning all my remaining strength, I made my way towards the pole, my wounds still open. Blood spilled onto the ground, adding to the spiral that led to him. He was unconscious. I removed the pins from his body and cut the bindings that tethered him to her. I'm not sure how, but I managed to get him to my car. We went back to my house, where I cleaned and dressed our wounds. He's still sleeping, but I know he'll be fine. I'll make sure of it. So here I am, back on Reddit, typing out this story, unable to believe any of this really happened. I never thought that any of these stories were real, but I just hope that this one is over. I know several of you want to hear from him, and we're both touched by your concern. He tried to give you an update, but it was removed due to the sub's rule that parts of a series must be posted 24 hours apart. Don't worry, he'll post part 4 as soon as he can.